From your left to right, that's Teri, that's Rachel. Say hi to them, please. No, say hi to them. Act like you like them. Much better. Most of y'all know these two because Rachel grew up in the church, and the two of them have been around a lot, but they just got back from the Philippines a little bit ago. They're missionaries in the Philippines, but really in the South Pacific, kind of. One of you pick up the mic there, please, and talk to me. You do this unique thing, though. You guys work for Wycliffe, and you're Bible translators, but not like we normally think. Tell us about that a little bit.
Right. So we work with sign languages. Normally, when you think of Bible translation, you think of books being produced. And because we work with the deaf in Asia in general, we are working with a lot of different sign languages, and our end product ends up being a video of the Bible translation. So a video of someone signing the Bible in their language. So we've been based in the Philippines and working there with Filipino Sign Language, but we also support almost a dozen projects in Asia working in other sign languages in the region as well.
Teri, we've talked about this before, but I just think sign language is sign language, but every language kind of has its own, or at least many of the different languages have their own sign language. Is that the right way to say it?
Yeah, I mean, there's over 400 sign languages in the world. We think of sign language as universal. A lot of people ask us that question, and it's not. There's similarities, but they're unique languages all over the world. So yeah, did that answer your question?
And sign language is not actually a signed form of the spoken language. So American Sign Language that is used here in the States is not English put onto your hands. It has its own grammar. It has its own structure.
No kidding.
Yeah, and that's true around the world. So it's not just that you take the same word order and the same words that are in the spoken language and sign them. It's grown from the deaf community, and it's very different than the spoken language around it.
You know, we've talked about this too. But why does it matter for somebody to get it like this versus just reading it in the book?
There's a lot of ways I can answer that. One of the ways I want to answer that is there's been 2 women that I've talked to that have had an angel appear to them that are deaf in the Philippines.
Wow. And
I asked them, I said, how did the Lord communicate with you? And they said, well, they signed to me. I was like, obviously.
Obviously, right? Yeah, of course.
Because how does God talk? He talks to us in the language we understand. And he wasn't going to sit there. The angel wasn't going to write on a piece of paper and hand it to him. That's how a lot of hearing people communicate with deaf people. But that's not how God communicates with deaf people. So we can't give them a Bible that isn't their first language. It's not a language they can fully understand. It's not a language they grew up understanding. The written language is a language that they had to learn in school, and they don't have full access to it. They have barriers because language is written. Language is not actually written. It's actually spoken and heard, and therefore we write what we hear down. And so it's not, written language is not normal, natural. It's something we've developed to understand our spoken language.
That's profound, isn't it? Like you guys have used this phrase with me before. It's like their heart language or something like that, which was just a radical thought for me. When we talked the other night, Rachel, you were telling us about how many of the deaf folks in the world actually don't even know sign language. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, this is one of the things that I've become very passionate about. We didn't know about before we arrived in the Philippines, and going forward, it's what I'm going to be spending a lot of time working on, and that is that if you think of how if you had a baby in your household, how they would learn language, they would hear you speak, and they would hear it for a lot of time, and then eventually they'd start babbling, and eventually they'd start speaking, and they'd be speaking the language that you spoke to them. About at least 90% of deaf people are born to hearing families, and most hearing families do not ever learn sign language. So deaf babies, when they're born, are not normally getting any language input. And for most deaf people, they start getting a language input in a language that they can fully understand without the use of medical technology when they enter deaf school, which is often around the age of 5. And that's worldwide pretty common. And for many deaf who don't
So
go to deaf
even here in
school,
the States.
even here in the States, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, there are a few foundations that are working really hard to try to provide funds for hearing families to be able to learn sign language or have a tutor and things like that, because it's happening here in the States as well. So it's worldwide at that point. One of the things that we're seeing in the Philippines and some of the other areas of Asia is that because deaf schools tend to be boarding schools in the capital city, then a lot of deaf children, especially in outlying areas, are never sent to those schools, which as a mother, I understand. I can't imagine sending my 5-year-old to the big city by himself or herself to live at a school and not have that input. But what that leads to long term is that then they're not being around the deaf, so they're not learning sign language because they're staying at home where there's no signers. So a lot of deaf are not learning language until they're teenagers or adults, and they're finally encountering the deaf community. So it's a barrier to just having a quality life, because you can imagine being able to gesture like, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, yes, I'll clean the floor, but not being able to actually ever talk about a thought or an idea or an emotion that you've had.
Wow.
And it's a barrier to the gospel as well, because when we're translating the Bible into, let's say, Filipino sign language, and we show that to someone who didn't start learning language until they were an adult, their language skill is not up to what it would need to be to really understand that. Because like I said, we haven't talked about ideas and things like that yet. So one of the things I'm passionate about with going back is how to really reach that population that is learning language much later in life.
Wow. Teri, tell us a little bit about the journey of learning sign language, because you're like an expert now.
Expert at learning.
Expert at learning, yes. I think I've tried to learn 5 languages in the last 5 years.
Is that all?
Hebrew, Greek, Filipino sign language, a few other Southeast Asian sign languages, and Tagalog. So for the Tagalog speakers out there, magandang umaga.
Yeah, of course.
There's 2 or 3 Filipinos. So, language learning is hard. It's a challenge, and it's actually one of the areas that the Lord has really worked in me, because I thought I couldn't learn a language. It was a lie that was in my head when I was in high school. And so he's really said, no, you can learn 5 in 5 years.
Wow.
So no, I'm not proficient in any of them, but Filipino Sign Language I can get around in, and I can do my work.
Tell us a little bit about the process. You know, we are going to have to tell the one story, but tell us a little bit about the process, because you're translating the Bible into hand motions so that it can be on video, so that deaf people can read their Bible, basically, right? Tell us a little bit about that.
So my job is like one little slice. It's an important slice, but it's just one little slice. So the deaf, they'll read the Bible in a language they can kind of understand. Then they'll draw that into pictures so they can kind of get a feeling of what's happening in that story or in that narrative. When they feel like the team feels like that drawing is good enough, then they'll step and they'll draft into sign language from that drawing. From there, the team will decide, okay, this is the best we can do. We will show it to the community, the other Filipino or other language groups. They'll show it to their own speakers of that language and say, what does this mean to you? And they'll find errors, and they'll go through that drafting process again, fixing all those errors, and then they'll give it to me. Once they think this is the best we can do, they'll give it to me. And I go through and I look at the Greek and the Hebrew and the English commentaries and all those things, and I say, okay, this is what I think you're signing. This is what I think the Bible should be saying. Do those match? And so it's a lot of back and forth questioning. Okay, because I don't know your language fluently, you have to tell me what this means. And so we do a lot of back and forth talking about it and working through it. And it takes a long time, but it's a really integral, critical step to making sure that this Bible is actually saying what it's supposed to say.
That's awesome, isn't it? That's spectacular. By the way, I was just talking with Gary and Peggy Rosensteel this week. They're in Papua New Guinea, and they're like this close to having the whole New Testament done in that language for that particular tribe. So exciting. Rachel, tell us a little bit about what you're doing here, because you guys are just on vacation for a year and kicking back, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're at the G-Hop house, and we basically just sit around and drink coffee all day.
Nice. I want to be a missionary.
We have a few things to do this year. So one of the things that we're doing is Teri is finishing up his master's. That is part of his training to do the job that he just described. So he's taking some courses online. He'll start his Greek course pretty soon, so you can be praying for him for that. But he'll be doing online courses. We are also raising more money because we are most likely not returning to the Philippines. The team there is really strong and can continue its work with just us visiting them a few times a year. And there are a lot of other places, specifically in Asia, that want to start Bible translation but need someone on the ground day to day to help them to get it up and running. And comparatively, the Philippines is a much cheaper place to live than many of the places in Asia. So the Lord has been faithful, and Southgate is a partner. Many people here are partners. We've been doing great, and he's abundantly provided for our needs. And the next season, those needs are going to get a little bigger, so we'll be doing that. Once we have 100% of our budget pledged, like people have said that they will give once we're on the field, then we will start doing a lot more Skype calling with teams in Asia to continue the work that we were doing. We'll just do it here. So Teri will continue to check different Bible translations for different countries and be able to Skype with them and make corrections. I will continue some of the research I've been doing, so we'll be full-time working just from here.
And then you'll land somewhere that you're not sure of yet. Just for comic relief, Teri, we need to know the story about you trying to pay a bill at dinner, I think it was.
So to give you a setting, we were at a church having lunch. It's a deaf church, and we were having just this lunch afterwards, and we were supposed to contribute a little bit to pay for the food. And so in Filipino Sign Language, I asked, how much to kill you?
Or was it kill the pastor?
It was the pastor that I was talking to. So how much to kill the pastor? And Pastor Ryan is very gracious, and he's looking at me like, what? And I'm thinking, because this is maybe 5 months after I arrived, 3 to 4 months after I arrived, and I'm like still trying to figure out how to sign. Okay, how, which is one of the simplest signs. How? And I'm like, how? H-O-W, how to kill you? And he's like, how much to kill you? How to kill you? Which one are you? And he was like, just talk to my sister, because his sister was actually teaching us Filipino Sign Language. And so I asked her, I said, how much to kill your brother? And she's like, what is going on? So I finally figured out that my orientation of my hand changed it from kill to pay. Pay to kill. So I was saying kill when I should have been saying pay. And so I often end up in situations where I'm saying the completely wrong thing and I don't realize it.
How can they get behind what you guys are doing? Is there a certain way that they should go online somewhere? I mean, they could hand you a Hyundai today, but I'm just saying, to become partners.
Right. If you want to become a financial partner, we are really needing people just to come on board. Southgate, you have been amazing partners with us, but we're at 71% of our target budget, and so we do need to get there. We have what are called ITPs. It's a little handout we can give you. If you're interested, we can give you one of those, and that'll direct you how to give financially to us. Also, we send out newsletters. If you don't get those, let us know. We can sign you up for those. There's a link in our newsletter every month or every other month. Whenever we send it out, you can click on that. Am I missing a way to connect with us? Basically, the one thing we want to share is once we get to 100%, I can go back to work doing Bible translation with the deaf. Otherwise, we're here.
Trying to make money.
Trying to raise money. So I'm eager to get back on the field.
Perfect.